Welcome to the Seraphine Podcast. I, of course, am Seraphine, and today I'm with two of my favorite yogis, and they are beyond yogis. These are like two powerhouse women and two women I call my friends. To my right is Electra Hendrickson, and across from me is Celeste Ellis. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
I am so glad you're here.
No, it's exciting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm just starting out. I was talking to them about why I named the podcast Seraphine. My name is Seraphine. If you look up like the old adage of the name, it's angel basically, but a lot of people would mispronounce it, like Electra's name and Celeste's name. That were weird names, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And the fiend part, like everyone's like, Seraphine? I'm like, well, fiending for something. So it's kind of that angel and that devil that's on your shoulder that makes you either go after stuff or like you choose, to do the bad thing. And these two women are kind of the epitome of that. When we went through our yoga training together, we really talked about like the angel devil on our shoulders and the things that kind of nag us and as yoga instructors and what are we doing. So as we start out today, I'd like you each to kind of tell me a little bit about your specialty in yoga and life, like mother, and just who you are. So we'll start with Electra first.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I teach yoga.
Yes.
I teach breathwork. I teach embodiment. I teach feeling and becoming aware of the sensations in your body that I think most of us bypass in this day and age. I've been doing this for quite some time with my own exploration of how and why yoga does what it does for my body and how it brings me into areas that maybe I don't want to go. Yeah. I'm a mom of three. I've got a 17, 15, 13. My youngest is a boy. That's to start out.
Very cool. All right, Celeste.
Yeah. I've been in the yoga meditation, who am I world, I guess is what I would call it, for, like 10 years or so. I got really into it. When I got into it, I went all in and went like really raw and real. So the big thing for me is that I grew up in this Western medicine world with my family being a family of surgeons and et cetera. And I really was like, there's this whole other thing that's ancient that I haven't tapped into that I feel like is a part of me and I'm so out of touch with. So that's kind of how I got into it. I would say my specialty within it is kind of this like seeker of meaning. Mm-hmm. Who am I? What do I want to be? Where can I lean into an edge? How can I get uncomfortable and also learn to walk with my sadness and crawl through the caves of my heart? Kind of all that really thorough, deep side of that at a little bit more Eastern philosophy than I would say most of how yoga is taught currently in fitness exercise world.
Yeah. It's been interesting because we've known each other for a couple years and we became a little bit more enmeshed in each other's lives when we entered into a 300-hour program. So if you don't know much about yoga and you're new to it, 200 hours is usually what your basic teacher has. And that's pretty intense. I mean, it is intense, your 200 hours, but 300 hours really about diving deep and really going into the mythology, the Reiki, the layers of the sutras, and just going into, to me, it's bringing it to where you can now teach others to be teachers. Yeah. I think that's really the point of it. So when we entered into this, the three of us, I can say we started last August. And we all kind of have gone on different journeys with it. I actually stepped away from it literally with 40 hours left or 60 hours left. And it was because I found out through COVID and through kind of all the social upheaval that has been going on in the last 2-3 months that I had another calling besides being a yoga master teacher. So it was a little hard to step away from it because I have really bonded with the women in my program. But also my whole feeling has changed about yoga in general and what I bring into a classroom. I wanted to ask you guys both, from us starting the program together in August to having this time off and kind of re-entering into this program, what's changed for you? What's really changed? And we'll start with Celeste.
I would say that in the beginning, and it goes beyond just like yoga teacher training, I was in this pattern of life of like, this is what you're in and this is what you do. And this is the next step and this is how this goes. And this is just kind of this rhythm that you're in. You wake up, you do this, that's natural, that's this. And then this great pause happened, right? And for some people, it's been really painful. For others, it's been painful and exciting. It's been all these different things. But it gave me this moment to have this really serious reflection about like, why do I do this? Like, okay, I've been doing it for a while, but it's been 10 to 12 years since I started doing this. And sometimes when you do something long enough, you kind of lose your way of like, you're just doing it. And you love it, but you're just doing it. So throughout this time for me, I've been trying to get back into like the root of it, like the heart of it, and less of the westernization of it and less of the, this is how you look sexy in yoga clothes, and this is what you do, and make sure you sweat enough, and make sure it's 100 million degrees so that you get your workout in. And I'm more like, okay, let's go back to that, like, how can we sit with being uncomfortable? That's what yoga is really about, is about not preaching, it's about profound, deep listening. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what has changed my perspective, and that's what I want to do more of, is deep listening and less preaching.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. COVID.
Yes.
Right.
I was so thrilled to take a moment to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the fact that it was trauma for everyone.
Oh, definitely.
And to feel normal. Mm-hmm. Those were some things that I needed to look at.
Yeah.
To have gone through, trauma in my own life, and then next thing I know, people are, living in it. Everyone, you can't deny that, or you could deny that an illness was real. Whatever. I felt elated and free, which baffles me in a way, because here's this awful thing that's happening to people's life, and here I am, like, yes,
yeah.
Yeah. So, I follow some therapists online, and that's completely normal when you've lived in a heightened state, or you've been in a place of discomfort, and you've gotten comfortable there.
Yeah.
When everybody comes alongside you and is uncomfortable too, it's like a sigh of relief. So I took the opportunity to just rest and let my body heal and slow down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Big time. Before working, because that's what we have to do to pay our bills as yoga teachers, some of us.
Yep.
And I was working to a point where, the eating patterns were sporadic, and you don't want to walk into a hot room with a full belly.
Yeah.
And so I just allowed myself to get back on a rhythm of self-care.
Yeah.
Top notch, and make sure my family was stabilized. Yeah. And I'm glad I did. I felt like I got glued back together.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Right? It's like, there's my joints. They're hugged in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here I am.
Yeah. Yes.
It's so wild, because I don't know. I think I had this profound moment where I just was sitting in my home, and I remember the day that it felt like I didn't know how long we would be here.
Yes.
Yes.
And I felt myself see my husband, who is in the medical field, so he was working the entire time. I saw him go in and out, and I just felt this profound sense of peace, but then loneliness.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, like, how do I go about dealing with this? And I remember we got on a Zoom call that day, like all of us, to check in, the group of yogis that were going through this training. And all of us were kind of like a little all over the place.
Oh yeah.
I felt like this sense of like, some people were dealing with a loss of a relationship. Other people were like thinking about, maybe I'm going to move and not stay in Kansas City anymore. Other people were just fine, and it was just this interesting mix. And then this sense of like stepping away from this really intense emotional work. The training has really been more like, for me, it was a lot of emotional work. And when I got off the phone, I remember my husband coming back and him just kind of looking at me because he was still living day-to-day stuff. He was like, "What's up?" And I was like, "I don't know. I feel a tactile shift in my whole world."
Yep.
And I guess where I'm at now is I really understand when I walk into that class now that it is a profound responsibility. You have an hour of somebody's life.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't even give that to their family where it's full attention. And then you have this hour and you're giving them a sense to be in their body and to really be present. But then what else are you going to bring them, And I guess there's so much pressure, in the beginning of like, do you know the Sanskrit words and do you know the poses and can you lead a complicated class? And and it just got to a point to where it became, it was so westernized that these moments of like sitting in the very beginning in meditation and ending, I was like not leaving enough time for it. I was rushing through and it was well, did you get into that bird of paradise? No one gets into a bird of paradise, but it's funny how I constantly needed that reminder when I first started to become a teacher. And then obviously as you start to teach more classes and you get to know your students, I think the thing that I started to find was it was no longer about going into like peak poses or anything like that. It was about, do I have the right words to talk you through a practice and make it meaningful? And then the days that I was tapped out and I didn't have anything to say, I didn't say anything, and I let them do the practice. So then it was this weird thing of like either I needed to be Mr. Miyagi or I had nothing to say. And it was disheartening because it was something that I didn't want to be someone who came in with note cards and quotes and all of that. Like it's sure if you have something really profound to share, but every single class I just was like,
it's performance.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes I think that we need, especially now, check yourself. Like, are you the one that needs to be speaking?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, and there's definitely a time and a place. Like I've got a pretty strong past with like mental health and depression, anxiety, and that's a place where I lean in and I'm like, I'm going to share my experience. But especially now with what's going on in the world, and is it my time to be talking a lot or is it my time to listen? And like, I think that that's something that we all need to in everything that we do, whether you're teaching a yoga class, whether you're walking into your work, whether you're walking in anywhere, question what you do. And do you do it because you've been taught to do it and everybody around you does it? Or do you do it because in your heart, that's what you feel you should be doing? And I think that's the work that like we're in right now. I was like, am I saying this thing in a class because I'm used to saying that? Yeah. And then you say it and you're like, Or am I saying it because it's my raw truthness? Right. Or is that silence my raw truthness?
How do you feel about, I don't know, it's interesting because, both of you have done some work, trauma work. And when you have trauma work within, you're weaving in the message of a safe space and creating that. In the beginning, I remember feeling when I started to learn some tools, I was excited to use them, but then I also would watch some resistance and then that sense of feeling like, well, I'm not a health professional, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, and that danger of creating this environment where, yes, we want people to arrive where they're at. We want people to experience their truth in their body. But again, there's also things that we do to manipulate it, whereas it's music, it's the poses. I mean, hip openers to like I just did in my yin yoga because we aren't doing any adjustments of self-touch and watching people, just men, crying. And it like, and just being, and again, in that space of like not wanting to manipulate, but also wanting to give permission of if you want to go there. So for you, Electra, I know you have done a lot of work in this.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it because, you know, you went in, what first brought you into wanting to have trauma work be a big, it's not big. It is, if I were going to have anyone who needed to work through something, you're the first teacher I would have them.
I appreciate that, Seraphine. So it tells me you feel safe with me.
Very much so. Very much so.
Are you asking what got
I guess what got
into
you? Yeah, I kind of like went. Yeah,
trauma.
And then you also, and I also would like you to talk about working with the first responders.
Okay. I was married to an inner city police officer. I did not get married to a police officer. He became a police officer when I had my third child, and a lot of resistance there. Not wanting to live that lifestyle. Period. He was a trained firefighter. And needed a job. We had our third baby on the way, and we needed to buy a house and create some space for our family. So he went in, he had some buddies working there, and it changed our life, changed him, changed me, and I didn't know what the hell happened. It was, over a period of 8 years. And so after the divorce, I'm like, I have to know what happened. I have to find out what happened to our bodies and our mind. And I think that was the underlying feeling of really just wanting to go in and kick their ass into the police department and be like, look, you guys got a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really can't believe I'm talking about this right now. I don't talk about it much, something that I've been processing a lot in the last month. So there was friends of mine that were like, you got to meet this girl, Olivia Kivnate. I think that's how I say her, like Kivnate. She's recently changed, but Olivia, she's the founder of Yoga for First Responders. And she was out of Iowa, and I'm like, okay, I need to meet her. What are you doing? How do you get into the departments? And ended up taking her training, and that's where I met Jeff Masters. They came to Kansas City, and in the academy, we learned about trauma and how the body stores your experience. Yeah. And that's known as samskaras. It's like video recordings in your DNA. And they brought us through the science coming down. It's new science. It's not that old. I think it's like in layman, it came to us lay people like 5 years ago. Yeah,
it was 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been written in text, but the interpretation and application resurfaced 5 to 10 years ago.
And Stephen Porges has helped get that out there.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, the healing took place when I forgave myself and forgave him and our experience, because what happened to us in the field was a normal response to the things that he had seen and experienced. And that was huge relief. And I thought I was going to go back in and go to the fire departments and the police departments, but for self-care reasons, no, it wasn't a place for me to be.
Yeah.
And the physiological response in the nervous system is something that every yoga teacher needs to know.
Yes.
Because it's science. It's not making a choice necessarily to non-react or all these special things that we tell ourselves, which are part of the yamas and yamas, yes, but your body automatically responds.
Oh, yeah.
Totally. And you got to learn about it. And when we're on the mat, especially in flow, like I'm stimulating your fight or flight.
Yeah.
And I'm here as a guide in a safe space to teach you to find your grounding through your breath. And ask me another question so I can get with
totally. I think it's so interesting that we're talking about this now because
for real.
Through all the social upheaval mix after coming out of COVID.
Yep.
I dove deep. I did because, you know, I've talked in former podcasts about Johnny and I were thinking about adoption. And I started to read some of the harder books about me and white supremacy and thinking about if I adopt a child that doesn't look like me, I need to know his history. And, you know, my husband got on the bandwagon with me and you know, he's somebody who he's got a beautiful big heart, but he has got a lot of friends around him who are really macho tough guys. And he's got some in the fire department, some in the police department. And it was really tough because I walked into a party and, you know, everyone was teasing him about the t-shirts and going to the protests.
Oh my gosh.
And, you know, they were doing it in like a loving way, but like also like, oh, here's your yogi, you know, wife who's getting you all into this. And it was interesting because, you know, they talked to me about where they are in Kansas City, and they're off a truce. They're seeing all of this upheaval like right in their face. And, you know, they wanted to go toes with me.
Yeah. I wish I would have been there.
Yeah. And it was a little hard being like this little 5'5" female being like, you know, and also right now feeling very much, you know, the term Karen. I feel like the Karen yoga instructor right now.
Yeah, you are like, not.
And it's like, you know, you sit there as this little white girl who's like, again, I can claim all of my Iranian heritage and all of that. At the end of the day, I do not read as a colored woman in any way, shape, or form. And frankly, I guess where I'm at right now is this real vulnerability of like keeping the story, the learning, the conversation, the interaction going without it being something to where people are like, ugh, we're going into this. So, you know, when you talk to me about these men who have protected us since we became a country, the United States, I mean, basically policemen started out what I have read is when you look at the plantations, there were policemen, quote unquote, and they just evolved into our police force. But these were people who were taking the slaves underhand, saying, "Get your ass in gear." Yeah. So, you know, for me, I guess it's really a delicate time, and it's hard for me not to want to lash out at my husband's friends who are
100%
serve and protect us. So I guess as a former wife of someone that was he was a firefighter and a police
trained firefighter.
Yeah.
And at the time they changed the rules to become a firefighter. You had to be a paramedic. So that was another 2 years of school that we were just not willing to do. And he had a buddy that was vice for KCPD and was like, hey, come on, we'll get you in here. And reluctantly, this was, they tell you in training or in the academy that you're going to walk out a different person. And he sure did. You know, that didn't show up for a couple years after that. But I don't care who you are, if you've seen trauma or dead bodies, children dying at your feet, you're going to change. Yeah. Right.
100%.
And you're going to react differently. I think you're going to react so much differently than someone like myself, who when I see someone being brutalized, immediately I'm the person who's like, oh, I've got to go. I would throw my body on top of someone. Whereas other people are like,
they do.
Yeah,
they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, they are told you need to go home to your family. And there's a time where, you know, they have to make that choice. And to go home. Yeah. And just for him walking out the door as a wife, that he may never come back. Yeah. Your nervous system is, you know, your head's on the swivel. You're like, oh, I can't watch the news anymore. It's a heightened state of living. And I lived like that for way too long. We live like that. My children live like that. Yeah. And meeting Olivia and Yoga for First Responders and getting the education and getting the answers of why, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
You know, this is 6 years now out of that training. And after the training, I also went into trauma therapy myself because to pick up the pieces of what had happened in our marriage. And I think that's where my cup overflows to share, even though I haven't said the T word in yoga very much. It'll slip out. I'll be like, hey, if you've got trauma in your past, use this breath work and help you, man.
Yeah, totally.
But,
and it's tough to say the word trauma now as a white woman.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but I mean, like you've experienced
very
your
much.
own. So talk to me a little bit about your story.
I kind of grew up here, and here I'm in Kansas City, in a little bubble. Just this little perfect bubble. And my bubble was rocked. I moved out. I went to school, and then I did Teach for America. So I worked on the south side of Chicago and then Little Haiti and Overtown in Miami. And that was my first, like, okay, you're ignorant in a loving space. I'm going to hug you, Celeste, and, like, open your fucking eyes.
Yeah.
Totally. Like, there's a world outside of you.
Yeah.
So, and that's when I got into that realm. I was teaching in a community that I looked totally different than everybody else. And I worked with young kids in elementary school. At one point, I had a kid that was shot in front of me. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. But the crazy thing about that is when I share that to people, it is traumatizing and it's heavy. And then there's other people I share that with that's what they've seen in their lives. And that's our privilege, right?
Yeah.
That's that space of like, I grew up in this bubble, so that's going to affect me a lot and it will affect other people a lot. But it was really eye-opening. And the crazy thing about that is that was like 5 or 6 years ago. So I started reading like White Fragility and all these other books 5 or 6 years ago, the new Jim Crow, because that was a part of my Teach for America training, particularly because they were like, look, you're great. You also grew up in a bubble. So you really need to educate yourself or you're going to get your shit rocked. Yeah. So that was kind of the genesis of that for me, of learning to shut up and to listen. Because though I love to speak and I feel power in my words, there's a time and a place. And that's kind of where I started to lean into just like, how can I sit down and humble myself and listen to other people that haven't been able to speak? And that journey for me started like 6 years ago. So it's been really refreshing this time now. And it's been so wonderful having conversations with people in my family and my extended family that would never really talk about this. And when I tried to bring it up 6 years ago, we're not having it. And now it's like, hey, look, you got to acknowledge your stuff. Yeah. And I think that just expands on a greater level to yoga in general. It's just like, this is meant not to be cozy, comfy enlightenment. This is not going up and being above. Right. It's going down and deep and in and dark.
Very.
Yeah. And I think that's like, yeah, that's kind of my history with it and where I've shifted into it. And I get so fiery about it, which is inspiring. I think it makes me feel alive. It makes me feel like I care about something.
What do you think has changed for you specifically from the time that you were in Chicago to now, like when you have that experience? And if you would share the story.
Yeah. So I taught on the south side of Chicago first, and that was interesting. While I was there, I taught third grade. I did have one student pass away. He was shot, south side of Chicago. Then in Miami, and that was like my first experience. Granted, caveat, this is just my one experience. This is not an everybody experience. Everybody has different experiences. So then I moved over to Miami. I did my training in Chicago, then moved to Miami and was a third grade teacher there. And whole nother topic, but like our school system, guys, horrifying. Yeah. So I was teaching third grade. I had to teach my children how to kill cockroaches while they took tests because there was cockroaches in our room. I had to segregate my classroom because Cubans hated Dominicans because their parents hated each other. Wow. Just, it was so many different groups and these young children that this is in their roots from their parents, etc. So in that individual instance, I was going to pick my kids up from recess, walked out to recess. There was a kid that was shot at recess. Everything's outside. He's an 8-year-old. He was shot and killed. Had to grab my kids, run upstairs, and go back to teaching.
Oh, my. Wow.
And it was something that...
How old were you?
Oh, God. I don't know, 22, 23.
Jesus Christ.
But it was horrible, but it shaped me so much. I mean, it just like... I feel like it was the moment for me that I realized that like I am not going to just live in this, like, I'm not going to sleepwalk through my life anymore. I'm not going to I'm going to have fun and I'm going to laugh and I'm going to have a drink and I'm going to have a good time. Yeah. But I'm not going to just like play this bullshit game of like, no, let's not acknowledge things. Right. We need to look around and acknowledge each other. And I don't think if I didn't go through that experience, I don't know if I ever would have acknowledged that or if I would have just stayed in my little bubble. Yeah. So
with that, I mean, how did life transition? You walking away from teaching?
Yeah. So I continued to work for Teach for America. My principal and I had some differing opinions. One of the other guys I worked with who I love dearly, we both had differing opinions from her. She didn't like either of us. She fired us because we were ruffling a lot of feathers. Yeah. And then Teach for America wanted us to go teach at a different school. And at that point, I was overwhelmed, couldn't handle my trauma, and that's where my yoga journey started. Yeah, awesome. So I moved over to Bali for a while, did my first training, which is so interesting because I actually went into yoga to escape something. And then when I got into yoga, I addressed it.
Yeah.
So they're like, sit for 8 hours. And I'm sitting there, visceral responses in my body. Like you say, it's like that. You can't deny it. You can tell yourself not to feel things. Viscerally, you feel things. You sit and you're like, oh my God, I can feel that space of the exact feeling I felt when I saw that he was shot. I can feel those things. So I think that yoga was my journey into addressing that. And then I came back and started teaching full time and got involved with Big Brothers and Big Sisters again and was in that space. But it was kind of like me coming home to myself in a deep and scary way and helped me more than any form of therapy that I had done address my PTSD from those circumstances.
I think that, hearing the two of you talk about this, it does, my empathy and my sympathy, because it wanes. It really does wane when I'm around my husband's friends. It comes and it goes. And there was one afternoon where we went for a ride out to DeSoto, Kansas. And he just decides to pull up one of his old buddies' houses and see if he's there. It was during COVID. And he's with the fire department, and he came on out. And we just start talking, shooting the shit. His dog is out there laying around. I'm playing with it. And he starts just talking to Johnny about life. And all of a sudden, he starts talking about what's been going on, with COVID and him with the fire department. And then all of a sudden, he starts to tell this story about one of the men they lost. And it was a few years back. And as he's telling the story, it's like you can totally tell that it's like, number one, it's not a story that he tells a lot. Yep. And you're watching him experience all the emotions in the moment. And I'm just observing this, and I'm watching my husband and him have their conversation back and forth. And I just have this moment of just complete and utter, just love for the man, because he's just talking about his brothers and about how, after it happened, he had to go back and, all the questions of how did it happen? How was he left behind? How did he die? And him still kind of grappling with it. And then just the conversation just kind of slowly fades and ends. And it's like this overwhelming feeling, when it's about to rain.
Yes.
And you can feel that, and it never bursts.
The heaviness in the air. Yes.
And I think about what these men face. And I think about having that big sense of that big cloud just filling, and you just want it to break. But if you feel like it breaks, then all of the training and that moment, the alarm goes off. It's like you're going to be so drenched from all of that sadness. Your clothes are going to be so heavy. You're not even going to be able to pick your feet to go up into the boots or put on the cap, and I can feel that with most of the men he's friends with, that it's like they have to keep going. And then they have these moments where you see it, you feel it, and then the moment goes away.
Yes.
And I think that's where it's so hard, because I understand I understand like going through life, like, you know, when someone pushes your head and you're like trying to keep you from punching, you know, and you just keep fighting and fighting. And sometimes I just wish that they could feel it, because I think that you're right. When you sit in meditation, it's like you watch a movie.
Yep. And
it's sometimes a really tough movie to watch. Sometimes it's a movie that starts out bad and gets better. Sometimes it starts out great and it ends up in a nightmare. But it allows you to sit in that place and to play out whatever it is you need to until that little bell goes off. And then you're like back into the world again. So I don't know. I guess where I'm at now is, you know, I sit across from the two of you and I hear like you tell these stories. And I guess I wish that more teachers would sit down and talk about what a gift it is that we have this language, that we can literally speak to someone and they don't need to know the Sanskrit. They just need to know the language in their body. And then we offer these moments of space and silence. And I just wish it was honored in a way that wasn't just some certification and in some, you know, building with, you know, fluorescent lighting, you know, and so I don't know where we're going to go from here, but what's your hope in, like, I don't know. I don't even want to give it a time. It's like in the next year, whatever. Like now, where are you pivoting as a teacher and pivoting as just a yogi in life, not just a teacher? Where do you feel you're changing?
I would say that I kind of alluded to this, but during all this, I started this like Facebook group. I don't know. I just put it together because I was like, okay, whatever. And it's called Seekers of Meaning. So I'm kind of leaning into this space where I'm sharing information from other people, but where I'm taking a step back from being the standing up and everybody listening to what I say. It's a little bit more like, here's some like chewy stuff and messy stuff to talk about. Let's talk. So I would say for me and my teaching, a majority of like physical teaching that I do is actually privately, which I love because it's like a cry loving safe space that we move to. And sometimes we don't move. Sometimes we just lay and like talk. So yeah, for myself personally, I'm trying to continue to lean into listening, deep listening. That's like my current theme. And really only speaking after I've deeply listened. So that's kind of where I'm shifting towards as a teacher, and just continuing to grow that group and that idea of putting out messy things with people that are different from me from a yogic lens and talking about it even when it's messy. And any of what that can be, social justice issues, what's going on in the world, the boxes we've been put into, how we were conditioned from our parents, all of the juicy, messy stuff.
Right.
So that's kind of where I'm leaning into now, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, back to you taking a pause and being excited about taking a break. You know, been teaching publicly almost 6 years, and just from ground up building in order to sustain myself and my 3 kids. And COVID hits, enjoying the slow pace, keeping that as I go back into work, because I enjoy the places that I work. I enjoy hopping, bouncing around. I'm just not going to fill my schedule up as much because I don't have to now. But the depth that I was able to find internally by sitting still for 60 days?
I have no idea. Guys, I don't even know what day
You're
it is.
still there. She's like,
what month is it? Seriously, right. It's 2020, right?
Seriously. Taking what I learned and allowing that to be a part of my life, because I felt like peace and stillness, it was something I was always trying to reach for, which if you just stop, allow, it's there. And maybe there's some work to do with reprogramming your mind, but once you have that baseline, I don't think it ever goes away. And that's the shift that took place in me internally was, I really have peace inside me.
Yeah. It's always been there.
To look anywhere.
It's always been there. Yeah, it's hard.
And creating a home space and home practice is, I haven't had the space previously. My boyfriend and I have purchased a home and have more space to breathe.
Yeah.
So I'm still going to I'm going to finish, this 500 hour or 300 add-on. I'm always going to be bringing trainers in town. And I think I'll always, I can't say always, but teaching group fitness. When I first got started, I was like, I'm a group fitness instructor. Because I can get up there and put a class together and have a good 100%. Time. Yeah. But I can't separate what I know, what yoga has done for me. Mm. So finding the right words, and I think everybody understands trauma now because we've all walked through trauma together in the last, with COVID and with the riots and upheaval in society, like you said. I'm probably not going to be as shy,
right?
Yeah. When it comes to trauma,
now's not the time to not have an opinion. No, it really isn't. And the other thing is test the waters. Have an opinion, and have an argument, and not feel like it's the end of the world,
and let it get messy, and then hug each other, and that's where change happens. Yeah. And like we don't have to be, and that's been freeing for me too. Is I think I told myself for so long that like you have to just be calm and chill and poised, and it's like you know what? I'm gonna listen, and then when I have an opinion, I'm going to say it, and my voice is going to raise, and it doesn't matter that I'm a fucking yoga teacher.
Totally.
I can still have an opinion and be a yoga teacher, and I can get mad.
Exactly.
We can be mad. We can be
the tone
everything.
Policing. What's that tone?
Yes.
Yeah. No.
I don't go out much.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, as we kind of, I don't know, like for me, I could just talk to you guys for hours, and I'm going to have you guys back again. But I guess as we exit out of this, first of all, where can my viewers and my listeners find you if they wanted ever to work with you? And then just a little nuggets of whether it be a thought, a feeling, or just advice.
Perfect. Yeah. You can find me at yogawithelektra.com. And my handles are all on my website. And a little nugget. We've walked around disassociated for too long. Lean into that pain. Allow yourself to feel it. Naturally, we don't want to go there because it's painful, but I promise you, if you sit, allow yourself to feel whatever surfacing at any given moment, any situation, the freedom is on the other side, but you have to go through it. You have to feel it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Definitely.
So right now what I'm really working and pushing is that it's a Facebook group, Seekers of Meaning. I do teach primarily privately and corporately, so my website is celesteellis.com. There's so many things that for me right now, it's like I almost don't even want to give the words, So take the time to deeply listen to people. And in their physical space, you can learn so much by the way a person walks in a room. The way they hold their shoulders, the way they breathe, like where they're tense in their body. So, and this is great advice for me that I'm really working towards, is just deeply listening. And I think that's where therapy happens. That's where love comes together. That's where people change. And that's where we get in touch with the deep peace within ourselves and walking through the caves within our heart. Deeply listen.
Yeah, I love these two women. It's really an interesting time for me because, I've got so much that I want to learn, and I realized how many amazing people I have in my life. There are other people in my life that they don't know it yet, but they will be in my life. But that people I want to learn from and I want to grow from. And this podcast is completely, I thought a lot about just the positivity in my life and then the negativity and where it kind of brought me. And now at 43 years old, being able to sit across from two women that I not only deeply respect, but I consider to be friends, and just get to share and grow and to have a conversation that maybe someone will listen to and something will resonate. And to me, that connection, that little space of
Yes.
connection is, to me, like, it's otherworldly. I think it's
really
pretty
is.
cool.
It's
Well,
way cool.
thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you
ladies.
so
I
much
love
for
you so
having
much.
us.
And I hope
Yes.
I see you guys again. And again, these are two women that, please look them up and experience what they can share. And God, like, I could go on and on. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to send you loads of love, and I'll see you on the flip side. See you later.